Welcome, my friends. Please go wash your hands. Okay, great. Speaking of washing, you may hear my roommate in the background. She's doing dishes, so that's what that noise is. I hope you'll be able to hear me over it. You probably will. I'm very loud. All of you know this. Okay, so it's time for the next installment of The Wee Free Men by Terry Pratchett, who I believe his birthday was recently. He passed away a few years ago. And I actually got the news while I was at school when I was Orly Kluk's assistant. And I was so sad. I cried at school in front of everybody. And everyone was very, very sweet. Because it was a huge loss. Because I think he's really great. And I hope after we read this book, you are inspired to read more of his work. And as you get older, I hope you are inspired to read his work that's more for adults, because it is incredibly clever and so funny. And it has all of these fantasy elements in it, like werewolves and vampires and dwarves and trolls, but not in the way that you would expect. Anyway, that's for when you're older. Okay, so we have found Roland, and all of a sudden Tiffany's running after him, and then all of a sudden she's in the middle of like a costume ball, and she's dancing with a peacock. And then the peacock just kind of wandered off sadly. Somewhere in here is the drome, Tiffany said to herself, and it must be a pretty good one. This is a big dream. Things were wrong though. There were hundreds of people in the room, but the ones in the distance, although they were moving about in quite a natural way, seemed the same as trees, blobs and swirls of color. You had to look hard to notice this though. First sight, Tiffany thought. People in brilliant costumes and still more brilliant masks walked arm in arm past her as if she was just another guest. Those who weren't joining the new dance were heading for the long tables at one side of the hall, which were piled with food. Tiffany had only seen such food in pictures. People didn't starve on the farm, but even when food was plentiful at Hogswatch or Harvest, Hogswatch is the Discworld's version of Christmas. It never looked like this. The farm food was mostly shades of white or brown. It was never pink and blue and never wobbled. There were things on sticks and things that gleamed and glistened in bowls. Nothing was simple. Everything had cream on it, or chocolate whirls, or thousands of little colored balls. Everything was spun or glazed or added to or mixed up. This wasn't food. It was what food became if it had been good and had gone to good food heaven. It wasn't just for eating, it was for show. It was piled up against mounds of greenery and enormous arrangements of flowers. Here and there, huge transparent carvings were landmarks in this landscape of food. Tiffany reached up and touched a glittering cockerel. It was ice, damp under her fingertips. There were others too, a jolly fat man, a bowl of fruits, all carved in ice. A swan. Tiffany was, for a moment, tempted. It seemed a very long time since she had eaten anything, but the food was too obviously not food at all. It was bait. It was supposed to say, "Hello, little kitty, eat me." I'm getting the hang of this, Tiffany thought. Good thing it didn't think of cheese. And there was cheese. Suddenly, cheese had always been there. She'd seen pictures of lots of different cheeses in the almanac. She was good at cheese and had always wondered what others tasted like. There were faraway cheeses with strange sounding names. Cheeses like Treble Wibbly, Waney Tasty, Old Arg, Red Runny, and the legendary Lancre Bleu, which had to be nailed to the table to stop it attacking other cheeses. Just a taste wouldn't hurt, surely. It wasn't the same as eating, was it? After all, she was in control, wasn't she? She'd seen right through the dream straight away, hadn't she? So it couldn't have any effect, could it? And, well, cheese was hardly temptation for anyone. Okay, the drone must have put the cheese in as soon as she thought of it, but She was already holding the cheese knife. She didn't quite remember picking it up. A drop of cold water landed on her hand. It made her glance up at the nearest glittering ice carving. It showed a shepherdess with a saddlebag dress and a big bonnet. Tiffany was sure it had been a swan when she looked at it before. The anger came back. She'd nearly been fooled. She looked at the cheese knife. "Be a sword," she said. After all, the drum was making her dream, but she was doing the dreaming. She was real. Part of her wasn't asleep. There was a clang. "Correction," said Tiffany. "Be a sword that isn't so heavy." And this time she got something she could really hold. There was a rustling in the greenery, and a red-haired face poked out. "Psst," it whispered. "Dinna eat the canapes. You're a bit late." "Well, it's Conan, old drome you're dealing with here," said Rob Anybody. "The dream would not let us in unless we were properly dressed." He stepped out looking very sheepish in a black suit with a bow tie. There was more rustling, and other pixies pushed their way out of the greenery. They looked a bit like red-headed penguins. "Properly dressed?" said Tiffany. "Aye," said Daft Willie, who had a piece of lettuce on his head. "And these trousers are a wee bit chafing. I don't mind telling you." "Have you spotted the creature yet?" said Rob Anybody. "No, it's so crowded." "We'll help you look," said Rob Anybody. "The thing canna hide if you're right up close. Be careful, mind you. If it thinks you're gonna whap at one, there's no telling what it will try. Spread out, lads, and pretend you're enjoying the Kaylee." "What? Do you mean get drunk and fight in that?" said Daft Willie. "Cribbins, you wouldn't believe it," said Rob Anybody, rolling his eyes. "No, you puddin'. This is a posh party, you ken. This means you make small talk and mingle." "Ugh, I'm a famous mingler. They won't even know we're here," said Daft Willie. "Come on." Even in a dream, even at a posh ball, the Knack McFeegle knew how to behave. You charged in madly and you screamed politely. "Lovely weather for this time of year, is it not, you wee scunner?" "Hey, Jimmy, how you no got pomfreits for an old pal?" "The band is playing divinely, I dinna think." "Make my caviar deep fried, will ya?" There was something wrong with the crowd. No one was panicking or trying to run away, which was certainly the right response to an invasion of Feagles. Tiffany set off again through the crowd. The masked people at the party paid her no attention either. And that's because they're background people, she thought, just like the background trees. She walked along the room to a pair of double doors and pulled them open. There was nothing but blackness beyond it. So, the only way out was to find the drome. She hadn't really expected anything else. It could be anywhere. It could be behind a mask. It could be a table. It could be anything. Tiffany stared at the crowd, and it was then she saw Roland. He was sitting at a table by himself. It was spread with food, and he had a spoon in his hand. She ran over and knocked it to the floor. "Haven't you got any sense at all?" she said, pulling him upright. "Do you want to stay here forever?" And then she felt the movement behind her. Later on, she wasn't sure she had heard anything. She'd just known. It was a dream, after all. She glanced around, and there was the drome. It was almost hidden behind a pillar. Roland just stared at her. "Are you all right?" said Tiffany, desperately trying to shake him. "Have you eaten anything?" "Fwa, fwa, 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 fwa," murmured the boy. Tiffany turned back to the drome. It was moving toward her, but very slowly, trying to stay in the shadows. It looked like a little snowman made of dirty snow. The music was getting louder. The candles were getting brighter. Out on the huge dance floor, the animal-headed couples whirled faster and faster, and the floor shook. The dream was in trouble. The Knack McFeegle were running to her from every part of the floor, trying to be heard above the din. The drone was lurching toward her, pudgy white fingers grasping the air. "First sight," breathed Tiffany. She cut Roland's head off. The snow had melted all across the clearing, and the trees looked real and properly tree-like. In front of Tiffany, the drome fell backward. She was holding the old frying pan in her hand, but it had cut beautifully. Odd thing, dreams. She turned and faced Roland, who was staring at her with a face so pale he might have been a drome as well. "It was frightened," she said. "It wanted me to attack you instead. It tried to look like you and made you look like the drome, but it didn't know how to speak. You do. You might have killed me, he said hoarsely. No, said Tiffany. I just explained. Please don't run away. Have you seen a baby boy here? Roland's face wrinkled. What? He said. The Queen took him, said Tiffany. I'm going to fetch him home, and I'll take you too if you like. You'll never get away, whispered Roland. I got in, didn't I? Getting in is easy. No one gets out. I mean to find a way, said Tiffany, trying to sound a lot more confident than she felt. She won't let you. Roland started to back away again. Please, don't be so stupid, said Tiffany. I'm going to find the Queen and get my brother back, whatever you say. Understand? I've got this far, and I've got help, you know. Where? Said Roland. Tiffany looked around. There was no sign of the Nakmekfiegel. They always turn up, she said, just when I need them. It struck her that there was suddenly something very empty about the forest. It seemed colder, too. They'll be here any minute, she added hopefully. They got trapped in the dream, said Roland flatly. They can't have. I killed the drone. It's more complicated than that, said the boy. You don't know what it's like here. There's dreams inside dreams. There's other things that live inside dreams, horrible things. You never know if you've really woken up, and the Queen controls them all. They're fairy people anyway. You can't trust them. You can't trust anyone. I don't trust you. You're probably just another dream. He turned his back and walked away, following the line of hoofprints. Tiffany hesitated. The only other real person was going away, leaving her here with nothing but trees and the shadows, and of course anything horrible that was running toward her through them. Hello? She said. Rob anybody? William? Daft Willie? There was no reply. There wasn't even an echo. She was alone, except for her heartbeats. Well, of course she'd fought things and won, hadn't she? But the Nakmekfiegel had been there, and somehow that had made it easy. They never gave up, they'd attack absolutely anything, and they didn't know the meaning of the word fear. Tiffany, who had read her way through the dictionary, had a second thought there. Fear was only one of thousands of words the Pixies probably didn't know the meaning of. Unfortunately, she did know what it meant, and the taste and feel of fear, too. She felt it now. She gripped the pan. It didn't seem quite such a good weapon anymore. The cold blue shadows between the trees seemed to be spreading out. They were darkest ahead of her, where the hoofprints led. Strangely enough, the wood behind her seemed almost light and inviting. Someone doesn't want me to go on, she thought. That was quite encouraging. But the twilight was misty and shimmered unpleasantly. Anything could be waiting. She was waiting too. She realized that she was waiting for the Nakmekfiegel, hoping against hope she'd hear a sudden cry, even Crivens. She was sure it was a swear word. She pulled out the toad, which lay snoring on the palm of her hand, and gave it a prod. It croaked. I'm stuck in a wood of evil dreams, and I'm all alone, and I think it's getting darker, said Tiffany. What should I do? The toad opened one bleary eye and said, Leave. That is not a lot of help. Best advice there is, said the toad. Now put me back. The cold makes me lethargic. Reluctantly, Tiffany put the creature back in her apron pocket, and her hand touched Diseases of the Sheep. She pulled it out and opened it at random. There was a cure for the steams, but it had been crossed out in pencil. Written in the margin, Granny Aking's big, round, careful handwriting was, This didn't work. 1 dessert spoonful of turpentine dew. Tiffany closed the book with care and put it gently back so as not to disturb the sleeping toad. Then, gripping the pan's handle tightly, she stepped into the long blue shadows. How do you get shadows when there is no sun in the sky, she thought, because it was better to think about things like this than all the other much worse things that were on her mind. But these shadows didn't need light to create them. They crawled around on the snow of their own accord and backed away when she walked toward them. That, at least, was a relief. They piled up behind her. They were following her. She turned and stamped her foot a few times, and they scurried off behind the trees, but she knew they were flowing back when she wasn't looking. She saw a drome in the distance ahead of her, standing half hidden behind a tree. She screamed at it and waved the pan threateningly, and it lumbered off quickly. When she looked around, she saw two more behind her, a long way back. The track led uphill a little into what looked like a much thicker mist. It glowed faintly. She headed for it. There was no other way to go. When she reached the top of the rise, she looked down into a shallow valley. There were 4 dromes in it, big ones, bigger than any she'd seen so far. They were sitting down in a square, their dumpy legs stretched out in front of each of them. Each one had a gold collar around its neck attached to a chain. Tame ones? Tiffany wondered aloud. But who could put a collar around the neck of a drome? Only someone who could dream as well as they could. We tamed the sheepdogs to help us herd sheep, she thought. The queen uses dromes to herd dreams. In the center of the square, formed by the dromes, the air was full of mist. The hoof tracks and the tracks of Roland led down past the tame dromes into the cloud. Tiffany spun around. The shadows darted back. There was nothing else nearby. No birds sang, nothing moved in the woods, but she could make out 3 more dromes now, their big, round, soggy faces peering at her around the tree trunks. She was being herded. At a time like this, it would be nice to have someone around to say something like, "No, it's too dangerous, don't do it." Unfortunately, there wasn't. She was going to commit an act of extreme bravery and no one would know if it went wrong. That was frightening, but also annoying. That was it. Annoying. This place annoyed her. It was all stupid and strange. It was the same feeling she'd had when Jenny had leapt out of the river, out of her river, and the queen had taken her brother. Maybe it was selfish to think of it like that, but anger was better than fear. Fear was a damp, cold mess, but anger had an edge. She could use it. They were hurting her, like a sheep. Well, an angry sheep could send a vicious dog away whimpering. So, 4 big dromes sitting in a square. It was going to be a big dream. Raising the pan to shoulder height to swipe at anything that came near, and suppressing a dreadful urge to go to the toilet, Tiffany walked down the slope, across the snow, through the mist, and into summer. And that is where I shall stop. Next time I see you, we will move on to chapter 10. I'll see you soon. Bye.